won't necessarily be expected to win this race, but watch out for him. He's quite a consistent performer, so there'll be some European pride on the line here. Meanwhile, in this lead group, we have the might of the East Africans trying to take on and tame Eliud Kipchoge, who has not been beaten over the marathon distance since his second outing with a not too shabby 2:04:05. He has never in his life run a bad marathon.
Interesting a moment ago, Rob, that we saw some of this lead group take their drinks from the drink station at around 11 minutes, which is very early on in a marathon. I was a bit surprised by that because it's a cool day. Predicted forecast when we looked earlier was 10 degrees. It does look like it's stopped raining, though. A little bit difficult to see, but so quite chilly. And ordinarily, in a race like this, the elite athletes would get their special drinks at every 5K. So 5K, 10K, 15 and so on. So quite early for them to be taking drinks. It's a 2.15K loop around St James's Park, and they have a drink station. There's one drink station per lap. So if they want to, they can drink very frequently. But I think we'll see a lot of athletes skipping their drinks on some of the laps, perhaps grabbing a drink every other lap. Of course, they're running clockwise, and on an athletics track they run anti-clockwise, so a little bit different from track racing. We did see a race in Prague in September, which was, I think it was 16 and a half laps of a just over 1 kilometre loop. So this isn't the first time this format has been used, and of course the London Olympics, last year's Doha World Championships, the London World Championships in 2017 also used a loop course.
14:48, Mara. It's just about low 2:03s, so it's pretty much what the elites have asked for in the very, very early stages. Moeen still up with that group. We haven't really spoken too much about the Norwegian, who was the European record holder for quite some time with that 2:05:48 in Fukuoka. Now fourth on the European list, and a fine cross-country runner. Ran well in the Europeans, in the World Championships last year with 11th over the 10,000 metres. But today is all about that man, front and centre in your picture. The world 5,000 metre champion from 2003, a bronze medalist on the track, a silver medalist on the track, and then arguably, well, I was going to say his crowning moment, becoming Olympic champion, but he might argue the crowning moment was breaking the world record, winning London for the 4th time, or running 1:59.
It's an embarrassment of riches,
It's ridiculous,
Rob.
Isn't it? Absolutely ridiculous. But yeah. Do you know what? I'm going to stick to my guns on that, Mara. I'm pretty sure I'm correct in the following statistic, in that until Kipchoge, I'm fairly sure I'm right in saying no reigning world record holder, male or female, had won the Olympic title, because it's a completely different type of race. And I was so impressed. The 2:08.5 that he won it in was an irrelevance. I mean, for him, it's almost, it's not a jog, but it's so far within his comfort range. I just loved the way he bossed that race, and to break that jinx was really incredible. And there was just a beautiful symmetry about the moment in Rio as well. I'll never forget it, because he had the bronze, he had the silver from Athens and Beijing, missed out on a place in the team over the 10,000 in 2012, and then turned his attention to the roads. And all of a sudden, all those years later, he did complete the set of Olympic medals. So call me old-fashioned. The 1:59's amazing. World records are great, but no one's ever going to take that gold medal away from his mantelpiece. So for me, that's his crowning moment. Would you agree, or would you pick the sub-2 maybe?
It's an embarrassment of riches to choose from. I mean, saying an Olympic champion and world record holder, that's an example of how he's so consistent. You get phenomenal athletes like Paula Radcliffe, for example, long held the world record but never won the Olympics. Your question, I'm afraid, is challenging my statistical knowledge of the history of the marathon. But I'm thinking Naoko Takahashi won the 2000 Sydney Olympics and also was the first woman ever to break 2:20. From memory, she broke 2:20 after winning Sydney.
Well, answers on a postcard with that one.
I'm sure while we're on air, the statisticians and experts out there will tweet us if we've got it wrong.
But no, I mean, I just love the fact that he's got the capability to race intelligently as well as to follow pacemakers and run fast times. And speaking of pacemakers, four-time Olympic champion, doesn't come much better than that in terms of Sir Mo Farah.
And accompanying him there wearing pace 8 is Matt Close, who ran 2:13.57 last year in Berlin. So pretty useful marathon runner in his own right. Of course, we said earlier that the pacemakers are here to do a job. Typically they'll go to halfway, sometimes to 25k. They'll have been given instructions from the organisers, who will have spoken to all the athletes and their agents. And there's several groups. So the top group we saw earlier aiming for 2:01.30 to 2:02. The second group aiming for 2:04. The third group 2:08 to 2:08.30. And the final group, this group, aiming for 2:11 to 2:11.30 for that Olympic qualification.
Yeah,
time.
And they've, just to clarify the times there, Mara, that group that we're watching went through in around about 15:40, which is, sort of high 2:12s. I mean, it's such a long way to go, but it's a nice, steady start for these guys from which they can build heading into the second half of the race, but there is such a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, in these early stages, you don't want to worry too much about the pace. I mean, obviously, you don't want to be much outside your target. But the most efficient way to run a marathon is even splits. As soon as you diverge from that, and at any time you're going faster than what you would be doing under even splits, you use up energy and fuel and so on, and therefore more likely to hit the wall before the end. So as evenly as possible is what the pacemakers' instructions are. But of course the pacemakers are only human and sometimes mistakes happen. But obviously Mo and Matt very experienced. The third athlete there in the red vest is Shadrach Kimining, who ran 59.27 for a half marathon in January this year, and so also a world-class athlete. We talked earlier about Moen from Norway, Rob. He's a very interesting athlete. If you look down the men's marathon world all-time list, you go through pages and pages and pages of Kenyans and Ethiopians, with a few other East Africans thrown in. But the first non-African you get to is Osako of Japan, and second non-African is Moen from Norway. He made an incredible improvement in 2017, running 2:10.07 in Hanover, and then in Fukuoka in December in 2017 going to 2:05.48. And that 2:05.48 in non-East African running terms really is world class.
Yeah, I remember it being a huge PB at the time. He's the national record holder in Norway over the half marathon and the marathon. European cross-country under-23 bronze almost 10 years ago. And actually, Moeen ran quite well. We're looking at Eliud Kipchoge, talking about Moeen, the Norwegian, who's there or thereabouts towards the back of that group. Moeen ran quite well. 7th in Valencia last December, low 2:06s. I think that was the closest he'd come to getting back to the Fukuoka form at the end of last year. So we'll keep an eye on that battle for European honours. But this looks metronomic from Eliud Kipchoge. Kipchumba. That was Vincent Kipchumba just behind him. Low 2:05s, won Amsterdam. Huge improvements from him last year. But we're once again focusing on the group looking for Olympic qualification time, which is 2:11.30. Mo Farah glancing over his shoulder. Barrios, the Mexican. Barrios was a fantastic 5,000 metre runner. 5 times the Pan American medalist over the 5,000 and 10,000.
And PB for Barrios of 2:10.55. So he has done the qualification standard, but that was in 2018, which was before the qualification period started. So I think he needs to run that 2:11.30 during the qualification period.
Grice, Nash, Lund, Scott and Martelletti, British contenders. Martelletti's run 2:16 in Berlin.
Josh Lundrob ran 66 minutes at the Antrim half marathon in September, so some good recent form. So these athletes training during a pandemic is a real, they face the real challenge of just not having many competition opportunities at all. And we've seen some track races going on in Europe, but very limited possibilities on the road.
I know, and it's funny, isn't it, Mara? You've got to... Those guys have been blown out the back of the pace set by the lead group, and yet you've got to remind yourself that the likes of Lund, Nash, Martelletti, they would absolutely wipe the floor at any park run anywhere in the world. They are absolutely brilliant runners,
yep.
But they're on a different level to these guys. Right, 5 miles, 23:52. Just having a quick check to confirm who's in that group.
While you're checking that, Rob, it's worth remembering that every man running today is world class. You don't qualify for a race like the London Marathon. You have to be invited to participate. So you have to have the CV of performances to get an invitation from the race. So they may look like also runs compared to people like Kipchoge, but every man starting this race today is world class. It's worth reminding viewers, Rob, that 45,000 recreational runners are out there as we speak, pounding the streets all over the globe. And that includes 10 men who are members of the Ever Presence Club. They are men who have completed every single London Marathon since it started 40 years ago. The youngest is Chris Finnell, who's age 61 now, and they stretch up into the 80s. I think the oldest is Kenneth Jones at age 87. So it started off as a much bigger group and has dwindled, but 10 of them have committed to being out there completing the virtual London Marathon your way, as the marathon have branded it, between midnight and 11:59 p.m. tonight. So very, very good luck to those ever presents, and may we see 10 of them out next year again. I hope so.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. October the 3rd next year. Here's hoping that will be absolutely rammed with family and friends waiting to greet loved ones at the end of the race. If you've ever run it as a club runner or fun runner, it is so hard to find anyone at the end, especially if you go back to the 90s, pre-mobile phone. They used to have, well, you would never have experienced this, Mara, because you're so good. They used to have the avenue of trees, 26 trees, and they would say, go to the letter that your surname starts with, because if you remember nothing at the end of the marathon, no matter how badly or well the race has gone, you'll always remember what your name is.
Yeah.
But you'd go to the tree, say with mine, it would be the W for Walker, but there would be hundreds and hundreds of people gathered round, and it would take ages to find everyone. Oh, there was a beauty and a simplicity to life before mobile phones. And by the way, just to clarify, on that 5 mile checkpoint, I've got my 2 pace charts here, K's and miles. We like the miles in old fashioned money in the British system. 23:52, just outside 2:04. So it's a solid rather than a spectacular pace in the very early stages. We'll get the kilometre splits for you as well, as and when they emerge. But it's a sensible pace. And maybe the likes of Eliud Kipchoge, well, we know he's more than capable. 2:01:39, the official world record. Maybe he'll be looking to pick up the pace as we edge towards the halfway stage. But it's they're not ripping up the trees as far as the early pace is concerned. But I think this is pretty sensible. Oh, there's Moeen, by the way, just on the back of that group on the left. He's the Norwegian we were talking about. But Kipchoge, Mara, should look comfortable at this pace. and does look comfortable.
Absolutely. I mean, like with Koska in the women's race, this is some 3 to 4 minutes slower than his best. I just wonder if, I mean, the men have the benefit of having seen the women not produce a world record, and I just wonder if they may possibly have adjusted their ambitions slightly. It is still raining. I thought it had stopped, but it started again. Meucci there from Italy, we talked about earlier, brilliant championship performer. Hasn't broken 2:10, but he really saves himself for the big occasions. He was the European champion back in 2014. We have to talk about shoes, Rob. Some viewers may have seen Eliud Kipchoge's shoes that he's wearing now in the news earlier in the week. He's wearing a version of the Nike Alpha Fly, and it has 1:59.40 written on the back of it for the benefit of his rivals. So this is the latest version of these shoes with a high stack height, maximum limit of 40 millimeters, and a carbon plate, a curved carbon plate inside, which gives you some energy return. The others appear to be in the Vaporflies, the orange or pink shoes, but Kipchoge is in a version of the Alpha Flies, which I think I'm right in saying he definitely wore for the 1:59.40 attempt.
Yes, I think there may have been minute variations, but it's tantamount to the same shoe. And I guess, you know, for those of you who were watching the elite women's race, we did touch on the shoes, because it is such a massive talking point in the distance running fraternity, and it's a balancing act between gentle increments as technology advances and big steps forward that are out of kilter with that. By the way, so what are we, 29:45? Yeah, so it's they could do with speeding up just a fraction. It's steady by the standards that we're normally used to seeing from Eliud Kipchoge. 30 minutes on the nose for 10K is around about low 206s, so we can expect to see them speed up a little bit, and maybe Kipchoge's just having a word with them there. That was the third pacemaker, Eric Kiptanui, a couple of excellent runs in Paris. I think I commentated on him there. I think he's had a 206 or a 207, and maybe Eliud Kipchoge has just said to the pacemakers, listen guys, we need to up the ante. Yes, you could see his arms going up there. He wants this to be quicker.
His arm gesture at the beginning of this conversation, Rob, looked like he was telling them to slow down, but that certainly looked like them to speed up. And judging by the splits, I suspect he wants to go a little bit faster.
Well, he certainly earned the right to have a word with the pacemakers, who you would duly respond, distance running royalty says faster. You say, by how much, sir? I'll start immediately. Look, we can't talk about the shoes all day, but it is worth touching on. One point you've made earlier today, Mara, that I really like is that World Athletics have begun an initiative where any elite athlete must have access to all the shoes that are legally available, because, you know, one of the reasons I fell in love with athletics and with distance running in particular is that, you know, it is probably the most accessible sport anywhere in the world. If you're able-bodied, you can run, and, you know, the spikes for the track nuances that comes later. This is, you know, athletics is an incredibly inclusive sport. It has no regard for gender. There's every bit the same level of excitement for a women's 100 final as there would be for a men's. Athletics has been at the forefront in that regard for decades, and you've got, you know, within the sport, you've got so many different physiques. You know, these giant shot putters, tiny 10,000 meter runners like Haile Gebrselassie weighing 7 or 8 stone. You know, athletics prides itself on being the most accessible sport in the world, which is why you have so many people from different nationalities. And what I think is very important, whatever your view is with regards to the technology and the speed with which it's encouraging, shall we say, these records to get broken, it's so important that at the highest level it is equal for everybody, because, you know, it's absolutely a cliche. You know, there are many Africans who come from, loving, supportive, provided backgrounds. Not all of them start out with no shoes, but that is the basic principle of our sport, that anybody at any level, no matter how little money they have in their pocket, they should be able to access our sport. So at least from a World Athletics point of view, they are ensuring that equality remains in place.
Yeah, the universality and accessibility of athletics is really critical. Of all the sports, it requires very little technology. Until now, it has required very little technology. If you think of sports like rowing, fencing, triathlon, cycling, the performance is in some way determined by your equipment, in addition to the human endeavour. Running until now has been really entirely about human endeavour. Okay, we have had shoes, but that's it. And the concerns around accessibility are the cost. So is it going to make people of modest financial means unable to do running?
And we must not ever let that happen, ever.
Absolutely, I agree. Then at elite level, World Athletics have now started this athletic shoe availability scheme to ensure that all athletes can access all shoes. But don't forget that at elite level, most athletes will have a contract with a shoe manufacturer. So it's fine for the athletes who are with Nike, with the Vaporflies, Alphaflies. The other manufacturers now are bringing out shoes, have brought out shoes which have a blade, which have a high stack height. But whether those shoes can match the Nike shoes remains to be seen. And athletes who are not with Nike, then the question is, do they honour their contracts or do they breach their contracts and go with the Nike shoes? So there are lots of questions about accessibility. What this really boils down to is preserving meaning in results for me. So when an athlete crosses the line, can you categorically say that performance was down to that athlete? Or are you saying, wait a minute, what shoes did that person have on? So World Athletics they've put a moratorium, effectively frozen the status quo effectively until after the Tokyo Olympics. And they've also set up a task force, a working group, to really get into the detail of this for the long term. And in the meantime, they've set up this athletic shoe availability scheme. But I'm an old-fashioned purist, if you like, and for me, the appeal of running is that it is really all about human endeavour. You can't make gains through equipment. And I feel that the shoes have perhaps sneaked us towards those sports which have a lot of equipment. But then on the other hand, you can't stop the advancement of technology and innovation. That will happen. So the key really is how World Athletics regulates the sport to ensure its universality, fairness, integrity, and so on.
Well said by Mara Yamauchi there, 6th in the Olympic marathon in Beijing and a Commonwealth medalist over 10,000 metres way back in 2006. What a great edition of the Com Games we had in Melbourne. Right, that debate will continue to rage. Let's focus on what we can see in front of us, which is a trio of fantastic pacemakers with a world-class field of athletes right behind them, spearheaded by Eliud Kipchoge. Coming round now with, 14 and a bit laps to go. It's 2.15k, so we'll focus our attention on the splits, the kilometres and the miles. And, we just need to keep a close eye on the speed with which they go through the next couple of K, Mara, to see whether the pacemakers have responded to Kipchoge's obvious demand to up the ante a little bit.
Yeah, they look pretty comfortable at the moment. I just wonder if the weather has slightly put them off the